Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion of the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum Extra, coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. Being a Friday, we normally review the major events of the week, but today we'll be focusing on the legacy of Archbishop Janani Luwum and the lessons for the leaders of today. We know very well today is a public holiday in remembrance of Archbishop Janani Luwum, who was killed 47 years ago here in Kampala during the Idi Amin regime. Now, it's written in history books that his killing is as a result of speaking truth to power. He had repeatedly questioned the overhandedness and merciless killings that were taking place. It is indicated that he had actually delivered a protest note to Idi Amin against arbitrary arrests and unexplained disappearances of people. It's indicated that on the 16th of February, a day like this in 1977, he was arrested together with two cabinet ministers, Erinayo Wilson Oriema and Charles Oboth Fumbi, and that on the very day, Idi Amin convened a rally here in Kampala where the three accused were present. They were actually accused of committing treason. There were other suspects who were brought at that particular rally, and they confessed that indeed they were working with the three, and one of the agenda was to return back Dr. Milton Obote, who had gone in exile, and that the other plan was actually to stage a coup. The next day, Radio Uganda did announce that the three had died in an accident, and that the car which was transporting them to an interrogation center had collided with another. The accident, according to Radio Uganda, occurred when the three tried to overpower the driver of the car which was taking them. But it was later written by the late Henry Chamber, who was there the Minister of Health, that the bodies of the three were riddled by bullets. That is contained in a book that he wrote, which is known as The State of Blood. Now, it's said that the Archbishop was shot through the mouth and at least 3 bullets in the chest. Now, some people say his death was inevitable given the prevailing political environment. President Museveni has repeatedly said that such killings were avoidable if the leaders at that time had understood the value of dialogue. Earlier today, there were prayers in Kitgum district in Chwini, where the late Archbishop was buried, and government was represented by the Internal Affairs Minister, Major General Kainda Utafire, who actually urged Ugandans to speak out about the ills in society, but also told them to vote wisely to avoid handing power to bad leaders. So we'll be speaking deeply on this particular issue to try and see the lessons that we can learn from this tragedy as we seek to continue building our country going forward. My name is Kenneth Lukwago Anderson, your host. You can be part of this discussion by sharing your views with us using our WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. Depano. Pastor Solomon Male, evangelical preacher and executive director at Rising for Christ. He's an outspoken critic of corruption in churches, especially those that promote prosperity theology, which he calls the gospel of extortion. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Spectrum Extra.
It's my pleasure to be here after so many years. I remember on one of the show after featuring, that's when I got a victim of extortion, a woman who was manipulated into believing that she can be cured of HIV. She gave over her vehicle to UCKG, Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. Instead of healing, she worsened. On her near deathbed, she said, if only God you can give me another chance, I'll go back and demand my car. When she came back to UCKG to demand her car, she was told you gave it to God. Then they had crushed it. So she sought my intervention. Police just extorted money from her and did nothing. She came to me, I intervened, we rescued the car, and then they sued us for defamation, which we won. Some Pastor Moses Solomon. I've done a lot of other things for the sake of the betterment of this country and humanity. I'm not overpraising myself.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here once again.
Thank you very much for sparing time to be with us here. Another religious leader in studio, Imam Kasozi, lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda, farmer, member of the Justice Forum Party, but also Imam at the Mawanga Mosque that is located in Munyonyo. Good evening, Imam Kasozi. It's a pleasure to have you this evening.
Good evening to listeners and viewers. Good evening to my fellow panelists. And as you have said, it is also a pleasure for us to be on Spectrum Extra.
Now, making his maiden appearance on this panel, Mr. George Musisi, lawyer, human rights activist, and a keen follower of better governance and human rights in this country. Good evening, and thank you very much for making time to be with us, Mr. George Musisi.
Good evening to our listeners. Pleasure to be here, and pleasure to have us, Kenneth, and my fellow panelists.
Honorable Stephen Mkitale Birawa, immediate former Blissa County MP, economist, proponent of national dialogue. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us in studio, Honorable Mkitale.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, fellow panelists. Good evening, Radio 1 viewers and listeners. More so at this point in time when we have been celebrating passing of exams, much as I am for continuous assessment, at a time when we have just been going through graduations but without hope for jobs, at a time when parents are looking for money to go to school, in the most expensive, the cost of education being so high, yet the education itself is not very relevant as it is. And even when we said 5 years ago we are going for a competence, more of a competence curricula, I have heard we are not ready to transit to it, because for the last 4 years we have not provided what was required to make the children ready. So I think for those who want to call themselves leaders at all levels, I'm not speaking about this seeking election, I think we have a tall order. The national dialogue should start with those critical areas, because we can see there is a lot of money to do anything, but the money for public goods, including education, health, seems to be shrinking. What is the problem?
All right, we'll have an opportunity, I think, during the course of the week to dig deeper on that issue of education and what needs to be done. Indeed, the government did inform Parliament that they are not ready to proceed with that lower secondary curriculum, at least the examination part, until further notice. We will be looking at that issue in
but there's no
detail.
fees refund. Parents have sold land, have sold animals, even those with FMD. I can't sell
Education is becoming a loss.
Right, let's jump into our topic of discussion today, and I'll begin with you, Pastor Male.
Okay.
Looking at the story here of Archbishop Janna Luwum. First of all, very quickly, based on what you've heard and what you've read and probably what you've experienced, what kind of lesson can we get from the late Janani Luwum, looking at what happened, the circumstances that were prevailing then, and what we actually have today?
Thank you very much, dear host. Let me start this way. If Janani Luwum were to rise today, if Janani Luwum were to live today and rise today, I'm sure he would stop the celebration. I'm sure he would stop calling him he would rebuke all those calling him a hero. He would ask them why. Actually, I'm sure he would get a whip. He would do like Jesus did in the temple. It is written, my father's house shall be called a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. It is written, my country, Uganda, is a country of peace, of freedom, of unity, but you've turned it into a country of disunity, a country of peacelessness, a country of very hopeless people. Why are you celebrating? Why do you commemorate my death? People who are commemorating the death of Luwum, heralding him a hero, are actually total hypocrites. They don't even understand why he had to die. At that time, if you want to understand Luwum and what caused his death, compare it with what is happening today. It's very, very wrong to get Luwum in the 70s and then forget about the current times when we are celebrating him. What happened then? Amin was being accused of butchering people. Henry Chamber, you talked about, left Uganda with millions of US dollars, which was meant for the health sector. So he's a thief. When he goes to Europe, he writes a book, The State of Blood. Talks about millions murdered. He couldn't even write 1,000 names of those he claimed to have been murdered.
Well, we do not have any record or any claim against the late Henry Chamber having left Uganda with millions of dollars.
No. Amin told us on state television and radio. I was an adult. Above, at least I could know what was going on, that he has left. He's a thief. There's Paul Mwanga, who sold the Uganda embassy in France to contribute to the struggle. And it was during those times that all that was happening. It's very unfortunate that Amin was fought by intellectuals who could make up stories, misleading the world of who he really was. But when you look at Amin, he was considerate, he was generous, he loved the country. He returned the entire economy, which was dominated by Asians, into Ugandan hands.
Right. Take us back in 1977. 1977. What was going on that time?
Ugandan dissidents were fighting to overthrow Amin. One of the persons they were using was the late Janani Luwum. Amin's intelligence investigated and found that he was actually connected. It was not a concoction. With the Runayo Riema and Oboth Ofumbi. Was it Oboth Ofumbi? Those were killed. Now, he was tried. It was relayed on television and radio. Then, of course, an accident was faked up. Among the people who were killed before the Janna Luwum was Dr. Sembeguya. Dr. Sembeguya was responsible for the death of Amin's wife. 2, Byron Kawarwa, he wrote a story, he wrote the play, or Imbarwa Wango. Okay? If you were criticizing or working clandestine to overthrow Amin, he would definitely go for you. Now, Janna Luwum was murdered. At that time, we were convinced that he died for the cause of religion. When finally things unfolded, they told us in 1979 that he had contributed to the struggle and paid with his life. So a street was named after him, Janna Luwum Street.
Who is then saying that in 1979?
Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Kero Lutwa, the late, all of those, the dissidents, the Wito joke, they regarded him a hero.
The UNLA?
UNLA.
Okay.
Considered Luwum part of them. He was not only a sympathizer, but a man who worked to raise funds. You know, formerly, religious groupings or religious organizations had immunity from checking their passos. So through that, these dissidents, including Museveni and his team, they were using Luwum to bring in money and weapons. Amin unearths it. If you were Amin, would you spare him? Fast forward, when Museveni takes over power, one of the people he celebrated in his life was Janna Luwum for working closely with them, helping them to fight Amin. Okay? Here is a religious leader, but who has another role of helping dissidents to take power. Now, because of that contribution, they heralded him a hero. And just about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, a national day was declared in his memory. Now, but unfortunately, even after declaring his day, that is 16th of February each year, we see what was happening in 1977 happening today at even a greater scale.
We'll come back to that.
Listen.
Let's first deal with that historical perspective. And I want to bring in Imam Kasozi, who almost shares the same background like you. Imam Kasozi.
Let me first raise a question. the question is, Imam Kasozi will answer it, my brother will answer it, even the lawyer. Me, I believe there is no president on the continent of Africa, except probably Mandela and a few others, who would not have murdered Amin, including our Museveni.
Who would have not murdered Luwum?
Who would not have murdered Archbishop Janani Luwum?
All right.
There is not even Museveni would have spared him. Then the circumstances today dictate that Museveni cannot just kill that way. But what is happening still inform us that killings are going on.
All right, let's hear from Imam Kasozi.
And religious leaders are quiet.
Imam, take us back 1977. What is your recollection, or what have you heard? And would you agree with the narration or the submission made by Pastor Moses Solomon Male?
Thank you very much. To agree with him or not to agree with him is another matter. But the essence of what he's trying to raise is what we need to investigate. I don't know whether you deliberately did it. To quote the late Henry Chamber.
I read his book.
My faith, I'm coming. My faith sometimes it disallows me to talk about some dead people because they are not there
to defend
themselves. That is the most critical thing. But the way these things happen, how I wish you had also quoted Muwonge. See, J.B. Muwonge, the one who writes in the Sunday Vision. He has a book, a narrative of his rule. Look at it and see what he has written on the pages with the death of Luwum. Another book written by also the late Bob Assos. The book is called 40 Tribes of Uganda, A Life in Uganda.
Maybe you just need to educate people who do not understand who Bob was.
Bob Assos came to Uganda as a colonial administrator or a man to work for the colonial government. He served the colonial government. He served all the post-independence governments, including that of Amin. Mutesa 1, Mutesa 2, Obote 1, and Idi Amin Dada.
That's the white man that they always refer to as advisor.
The husband of Mere Senkatuka Assos, the Minister of Culture and Community Development then in the Ugandan government.
Okay.
And the resident of Mukono. He had a farm in Mukono, Nachisunga side. He had a farm there. I wish you have also you find
quoted his book.
He's quoted his book.
What do those books say?
Because all of them will point to almost what Malay is saying. You see, and Assos was as close to Amin as I don't know, because Assos was an informer. Assos was a public servant, not in Amin's government, in the Ugandan colonial and post-colonial governments. He operated hotels. So he has a lot of history, much of which is untold. The problem when we talk about Malay probably could have all those guts and say that. What I want to say, or what I'm going to say, some people may look at it as biased, probably because I am Muslim. Idi Amin was a Muslim, but I want to speak as a Ugandan and a human being who thinks no life should just go anyhow. The sermon I gave today was about repentance. And the repentance, which means you repent never to return to the what? And one way of doing it, you see, that when you sin, for example, including killing a person, how do you repent? To whom do you speak to? Therefore, we are both, I think, unfortunately, largely, we are speaking to a community or a society that does not read. educated people, but very ignorant, suffering from secondary ignorance because they don't read. That is number one. Number two, we are talking to people, a society that is polarized. What he was talking about is polarization. You see, of course you have heard, Idi Amin's own son has written denying that his father did not kill what? And what Malay says, dissident, or people who are working with dissidents, we are not exclusively non-Muslims. There are a number of Muslims, including sheikhs. Sheikh Zubair Bakari. Museveni, he speaks of how he helped him, how he even appointed him an RDC. Yeah. Haji Haruna Chibuye. These are people I know. You remember when Chibuye became very annoyed with Museveni and he said, come and collect your books, which you used to keep your bullets in my house, before he died. Okay, so these are issues we need to look at with a broad mind, without a bias, without thinking that somebody is biased, but in a polarized society, you cannot avoid that. What he has just stated is what I think Francis Mbuga states in his book. He said that even if it was Museveni then, he would probably have done the same.
In petals of blood.
We have an example. You may say Jamilu Mukuru is in prison, he's locked up, because maybe the order of the day
is not
needs.
clear.
But is he tried? 8 years, now 9, in Rizira here. Where is his trial?
Investigations are going on.
Which investigations? This was a person who was, is it deportation? No, extradited. When he was arrested in Tanzania. Of course, I know part of the complication of his trial is because you see in the extradition treaties and laws, there are certain crimes you cannot accuse people, even when they, because otherwise when you that's what you are going to try them for, you try them in your country, they will not give them to you. The lawyer knows. So he was extradited for some other reasons. But the people here accuse him of other cases, and therefore his trial becomes a bit complex, and that's why it is easy to say he's a terrorist. Because when they call a terrorist, everybody gets scared. We are demanding, because probably it would help us. Okay, we know several sheikhs, clerics, if you can call them, have been shot dead in broad daylight. Investigations,
unresolved matters.
The first one 10 years ago of Sheikh Abdul Karim Sentam, 10 years ago. You don't have anything. Mustafa Bahiga, Hassan Ibrahim Kiri, and others. Sheikh in Mayuge, Abdul Qadir. You cannot trace. So, but what I'm saying, what I wanted to quote from the book of Francis Mbuga, in his book Betrayal in the City, he says when the madness of an entire nation disturbs a solitary mind, it is not enough to say that a man is mad.
So let's go for a break now, Imam. Let's go for a break, Imam. When we return, I'll allow you to build up there and explain to us which man are you talking about, who is mad, and how that madness is likely to disturb entire state. State Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you very much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our focus today is on the legacy of the Archbishop Janani Luwum and the lessons for leaders of today. My guest, Pastor Solomon Malay, evangelical preacher and executive director at Rising for Christ. We also have in studio Honorable Stephen Kitalewirawa, economist, political scientist, immediate former Blissa County MP, and Mr. George Musisi, a lawyer with keen interest in governance and human rights issues. Before we went for the break, Imam Kasozi was concluding a point. Very quickly, Imam, before we move on to the other two.
So, did I mean really kill Bob Assos? Of course, some people will allege.
Bob Assos?
Sorry. the Archbishop. Many people will allege that he shot him. He didn't. He's not the one who shot him.
I have seen a video where Amin was addressing the African, the Organization of Africa Unity meeting at Nile Mansion, currently Serena, and he said, they are saying I'm the one who killed him, but I was here at Nile Mansion. But some people will argue and say he didn't have to shoot him by himself.
Do you know,
still order other people to do that?
Do you know that Amin got angry with people who shot Luwum dead? Do you know that one? You will find out. That's why I told you, go and read. And in your reading, don't get biased. Because I'm telling you, that's why I told you.
Imam, that's why you're here.
Yes.
We want people that to understand.
You know, questions are answered by question rather than other statements. Ask people further so that you interrogate them. So that people understand.
Let me help you.
Why you reach this?
Let me help Imam Kasozi.
Information.
In one of his statements, many times Museveni has said that they used to use people within the government to achieve the objectives.
That one I am aware. But what I wanted to say,
all right,
the Archbishop, for real, he participated in the struggle. Like many other Ugandans, that's why I told you, including sheikhs. Do you know the late Sheikh Senyonga? Sheikh Ali Senyonga was part of this struggle. He was a Muslim cleric. Sheikh from Azhar, Misri.
The late Bishop Nsoboga.
So, the day when this information came, Idi Amin summoned all the bishops. He actually first had a meeting with Bishop in Subuga for the Catholic Church, the Archbishop, in a meeting. And they talked many things. Then he told, and the Bishop was there, the Archbishop was there. These two others were in prison. And he then told them that, you know, for you are here, but you are co-accused, already in jail, in prison. And then maybe that's why they called it for the second day. In the process of the second day after that meeting, of course they will tell you, Amin was annoyed that of all people, Archbishop, why do you do this? Why do you do this? So some, what do we call them? These enthusiasts in every community. There are people here who have either killed, maimed people, tortured them, in the name of Museveni, and Museveni does not know. You see? So
the trigger happy people.
Yes. Actually, it is what happened to Janna Luwum. However,
so there is a likelihood there were no instructional orders from Idi Amin to have.
Not a likelihood. No, it was not there, according to the other writers. You see, according to the other writers. The bad thing is, when they realized he was dead, you could even ask, who is that person who moved first to say on Radio Uganda that it was an accident? You see? Now, remember, before that happened, people had attempted to shoot Idi Amin in Zambia. Are you not aware?
We are aware.
When they killed his driver Moses. So that's why I had to quote Francis Nzumuga's statement. All said and done, we let us also, for at least once, agree that the Archbishop had a case, but did it warrant him to die? That should be the question we need to answer.
All right, let's hear from the lawyer, George Musisi. Much younger, as somebody who has probably read it from the books, just like me. We heard from the two who had first-hand information about what happened there. What's your take?
Well, yes, like, let me first plead guilty, like you've mentioned. I did not live through Idi Amin, but I've had the benefit of reading a number of records of people who lived through, including State of Blood, which I read over 10, 15 years ago. Many times we should not understand is that history is written by people from the convenience of where they were seated or what they want to project. We've seen that over time. And I've read several writings regarding Idi Amin's time. And even one of the senior journalists, Timothy Kaligira, at some point during Monitor tried to project so much that to debunk the theory that over 500,000 people died. How many people died? Timothy used to write those writings. The most recent account, and I possibly, which I've read, the most recent publication, I think is the Honorable Rugumayo's book, which was published last year, Why Fireflies Glow, which I would recommend, because it tries to give a very vivid, I think it was published about 4 months ago.
What's the title?
Why Fireflies Glow.
Why Fireflies
Glow. It's an autobiography by the Honorable Rugumayo, who served as a Minister of Education under Idi Amin for about 5 years before he fled into exile.
Okay.
And he tries to contrast the earlier writings. He tries to contrast State of Blood. He tries also to debunk Karyegira's book. Now, one of the things that come out, and I think it also came out in Pastor Male's submissions, is that if I have a trajectory that Amin did many good things, I want to diminish the bad things he did. And I see that in this government as well, that if you believe NRM has done so many good things, you don't talk about the bad things. Let me start by debunking some things Pastor Male said. He said intellectuals fought Amin. And I'm going to contrast it with today. Why intellectuals fought Amin, in my opinion, was many of them faced the brunt of Aminism more than ordinary people. We can even mention them, even the Archbishop we're talking about and the ministers who died, the intellectuals. Teresa Nanziri, the sister of Oishtiba Maiga, in Warden of Africa Hall, she was abducted, eventually found in River Seziba with bullet wounds in the neck. You can talk about Ben Chiwanuka. You can talk about Frank Kalimzo, Vice Chancellor of Makerere.
Ben Chiwanuka is a big thorough story.
What we know is that he was not seen during Amin's days. That's what we can. That's what we can agree on.
Killed him.
We'll have that discussion.
Yes. So you can talk about Frank Kalimuzo.
Kawadwa.
You can talk about yes. Yes.
You 171.
And many lecturers who fled Makerere. To the contrary, Anderson, you know that I do a lot of human rights litigation in this country.
Indeed.
And almost every day, even yesterday, I was in High Court trying to get a habeas corpus. The habeas corpus means someone is missing, was taken by the state, and we don't know his whereabouts. For the last 4 years, we've been to High Court over 50 times. Most of these people are not lecturers, they're not journalists, they're not lawyers, they are border people. So I'm trying to contrast that it was evident why intellectuals fought him, because maybe they bore the biggest brunt of his excesses. Yes, I agree that Amin faced even armed invasion. There was an armed invasion in Barara from Tanzania. There were armed threats. President Museveni himself says, Amin ruled me for just 1 day and I went to fight him. So there were threats. What I don't want to agree was that, and Imam also makes a point, that there was a case against Archbishop. Now, for me, when you say there was a case, it presupposes that this case was made public. If the case was only between one person, because we've had several accounts that maybe arms were found or maybe arms were not found, the mere fact that a case was not laid out in any public forum, then you will not be any different.
There was a public court, called a rally, and the 3 accused were there and openly accused.
Even that was not a court.
But you see,
they read out.
There's what they call the court of public opinion.
If it was a court, then they would have said that Archbishop was executed, like Amin used to.
Okay, you would have preferred that they be taken to courts of law.
Yes,
and of course, no. I think when we talk of a case, it's unfortunate we are talking the fair lawyer, but to the ordinary, me, him, anything one is accused of is a case.
No, what makes it a case, Pastor Male, is that it's one thing to be.
You're talking from a legal perspective.
Even an English point of view. Because I can say, Pastor
there was a case.
That's not a case.
There was a case where allegations were made.
Let's get this clear.
Let's get this clear.
Yes. At that time, were the courts functional?
Let's say this. Even if you're using the military tribunals, it's better to say there were allegations against him.
Okay.
Because it would be different, Pastor Mare, if that public court sentenced him and he was shot in execution of a court sentence. They are saying he died in an accident. That's the official version. So it's different. So you cannot say he was executed for the allegations. The mere fact that government didn't come up to own, because there are people who are being executed publicly in execution of.
But his killing was not an execution.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That you can't attach it to the allegations of calling it a case.
Okay.
The other point I wanted to point out that actually, if you
see, let's allow him to learn. Then I'll give you an opportunity to weigh in.
If you go down the road of saying that these people who made allegations and you believe them, then how different are you from the late Okech, who executed the people who some of us believe those people who were arrested allegedly as suspects of the General Katumba Amara shooting, who kept on saying they were killed, put out of action because they are fighting back. Or how different would you be? Because I'm one of those who don't believe that people were fighting back after being in custody, some of them for over 24 hours. Or Zebra Mando, who was shot in self-defense, allegedly. You'd not be different if you walk down that road. So, before you go even into the fairness of whether those were trials or not, because some of us today are fighting even court martials trying civilians. Now, if you justify the public trials, if it would even be different if they said the allegations made against him, this military tribunal made past the sentence and he was executed, that would be different. The mere fact that government didn't want to own up and framed the accident possibly shows that there was something fishy they're trying to show. So for me, I don't want to even compare. Pastor Mali said that the abuses are taking place at a greater scale. I don't want to compare the two. What I know is that the Archbishop had made a protest note to the president a few days earlier, talking about disappearances and arbitrary killings. What makes people shocked, including myself, is that yes, the disappearances are happening today. Anderson, you know we have a case in court.
We'll be coming to the present sense now, but you've responded to the historical perspective.
Yes. So whether they were happening at a greater scale or not, we cannot compare the two. What we know is that if one person loses an individual, goes missing, either in Museveni's government today or in Amin's time today, the other day, you wouldn't be there saying this one was better, because one person, one Ugandan doesn't have to die arbitrarily.
All right.
So for me, I think that when you look at history, in conclusion, many times us, of course, Pastor Mali can have an opinion on Chambers' book because it's a publication, but also in absence of a publication of his own, the bank, it remains an opinion.
All right.
And we've seen different opinions, of course, many times given by, they say that history is written by the victors.
All right. Let's bring in Honorable Stephen Mkitali-Birawa. Pastor Mali, I will be coming back in another round, so just prepare your response to some of these issues. But also, in the next segment, we'll be looking at the current situation. What lessons can we take to avoid a repeat of this? Because that's the essence of actually such a commemoration. Honorable Mkitali, the historical part of it, what do you know?
First of all, it has never been abundantly clear that the country has been denied the truth and reconciliation. That deception has gone on in this country, and people have continued to lie even when it is not necessary. As an economist, I don't believe in rebellions, guerrillaism, juntaism, because it is economic saboteur. It will never be so-called freedom fighting. That's why I speak on this microphone. I have so many reasons to get an arm and even cause a rebellion, because a lot of things have gone wrong in this country. But I will never, because as a young UPM sympathizer, I was told by UPC elders, including my father, that what you have destroyed in the bush for 5 years, you will never fix, even if you're given 40 years. We are coming to 40 years, and we are going to fix what we spoiled. So, I really don't want to get lost. More so, at a time when we are still talking of extrajudicial killings, abductions, and disappearances. General Tafile today has confirmed that even at that time, as a junior public service officer, when they were arraigned at Nile Manson's, they were already in the struggle against the government. There was a rebellion. That was after the Mbarara failed attack. People died in Mbarara. My in-laws say, the Baganda, in Segula Mnambonga, you are happy with that Nenga Ngo Talim. This country has not documented how many people have died in this country and killed by who. We don't have that. That's why we are not. The other day we said only 50 died in the last election. Only 50. We think the house flies or cockroaches. So this is how unfortunate my country has sunk.
I survived the bullet.
So some of us who lost our years of school, some of us who lost a whole family business, some of us who have lost brothers who were eliminated in this body politics, allegedly accident gone bad and were brought up orphans. We cannot wait to hear those legalese and what and what. By the way, I believe first of all we have too many public holidays. All matters must be celebrated on one day. Matters. Because the governments of then, including the Mwangas, believe they were against their power. And all heroes must be celebrated one day, the Independence Day. After all these days, when we are celebrating independence, we don't even refer to those who fought for independence, not even in NAM. Uganda joined NAM in 1964, but who talked about them in the recent NAM? So we are living a country of deception, pursuit of power at all time. It was at the days of Cecilia Ogwal. We had people praising Cecilia's who are fighting for that, but they don't practice it. And that's when somebody was reminding me when we were at, in the gallery there that GSU, Rwanyararis and Syria and so many people worked under that. This secret, the government of the day security agencies were very effective. My father was being picked by State Research Bureau. Not because Amin was bad, but my father was getting communication from the Tanzania people, including his OB Rangaranga, another group of Freeman Mateke, the Soroman, to mobilize cooperators in Munyoro and the head teachers to join the struggle.
So he was a collaborator.
That's why. So if he had been killed by Amin, you don't blame the State Research Bureau. When people went to the bush in Luweru, I was in Kabalega, I was in Satito. It was called what? Obote 2 had, was it NASA?
Special, they had NASA and Special Forces.
Those guys were real. Whoever they went to have been given medals, have been celebrated. So what I think we should be doing if we want our children, and if we really care about the grandchildren we now refer to, the Bazukuru, we must condemn the culture of banditry, of guerrillism, and the so-called freedom fighting. It's not freedom fighting. That's no wonder. Have you heard the speech of the Chief Justice today?
No.
As an elder of Acholi, they are tired of accompanying other people in Uganda who did not host the war and have enjoyed development for 40 years, and they are being told they are in the same country. For how long will they continue accompanying others? And yet he was the chief guest. The statement of the elder of Acholi, the Chief Justice, and the one of the president cannot meet. Because the one he read as a president is not of the proper Acholi. No wonder. He said in these results of secondary schools and PLOE, good Acholi district was only competing with West Mengo and East Mengo. Today, they are nowhere. He said they were very rich. Today they are the poorest. No wonder. We need the herdsmen to go and develop agriculture in the north. What an insult. That's the level of insensitivity this country is. You've heard me talking about the oil being in the Munyoro and Acholi. How can oil be from Acholi without a single contractor from Acholi, no consultant from Acholi? The oil, if that oil had gone to Lamu, through Acholi, possibly Bunyoro wouldn't get the road. The road would be in Acholi. But because we are in power, we said the road it should go to Tanzania and reward Tanzania. And that's the politics we are suffering now with Kenya. Actually, I have nothing from this oil and gas. The looting is being done by not even Bunyoro. We are spectators. So, the injustice is at the level. The colonialist, the white man, was much better. When he brought when he went to Nimule, Sudan and Congo through the Calvert, he left me in the hotel. These ones will not leave you anything.
I have had you before here on this show.
When they took copper,
when we are commemorating,
they left Kilende.
They leave you the refinery.
Nothing.
Honorable Mkitale,
I am yet to look at the details of the refinery. The refinery may be another Bujagali. It could be another Bujagali. Who has seen the details? Who has seen? No. Who is going to benefit?
Back to
I am yet to know whether it's going to benefit Ugandans, whether it's for the host community, or it's a deal.
All right.
For somebody to sack from government.
Let me redirect you. So, looking at what transpired,
and I'm speaking this energy because I'm speaking for national dialogue, truth and reconciliation.
Looking at
Uganda was buried long ago.
Looking at
we are dealing with something else until we agree to have truth and reconciliation.
All right.
And look at do you know how he ended the Chief Justice? The slave master relationship. They are slaves in this country and they are masters. And we should stop that. I have been talking.
Who are slaves?
Of course, they are
Those in power.
Well, they are shareholders in Uganda.
It's only
I wanted to know whom do you refer to as slaves?
Well, he didn't explain much on that particular statement.
Let me bring it out further because I've said it many times. The education system we have today, by helping those who are privileged to have their children go to government sponsorship, engineers and doctors, and leaving our children selling our land and our cows into courses which do not give them any jobs, and then you give 5 million to the others. You are creating a caste system of India in Uganda today.
But that's what I mean.
That's the beginning of the slave, and that's why Pastor Male is referring to Amina as a hero. I've had traders, Kasita, fighting URA and the protection of so-called investors when Ugandans are being pulled out of business. That's why is being referred to. So why don't we own up our ugly past and agree that today we have two governments? The one you talk to, which goes to parliament in Kosase, and the other one, the colonial investor. The collaborator who is working, sucking the blood of citizens, taking the marrow of Ugandans. Allegedly, they are not accountable. You can call them mafias if you want. Others call them deep state. That's where the problem is. And until we speak about this, you will not find... You see the confusion in Parliament. How can Parliament stand there to say government should regulate school fees of private schools? Is that madness? Why are government primary schools and secondary for the poor, so that you have the luxury of going to a private school?
All right, this is Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week, but our specific focus is on the legacy of the Archbishop Janani Luwum and the lessons for leaders today. We are going to go for a break, but when we return, we'll be shifting our gears to look at the lessons that we can learn from that particular situations. Send us your messages, your views, your questions or comments on the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. We're looking at the legacy of Archbishop Janna Luwum and the lessons for the leaders of today. My guest, the Honorable Stephen Mtalabirawa, economist, political scientist, who is the immediate former Lisa County MP, proponent of national dialogue. Imam Kasozi, lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda, farmer, member of the Justice Forum Party. George Museveni, a lawyer and human rights activist, keen interest in governance. Pastor Solomon Male, evangelical preacher and executive director at Rising for Christ. And I'll come to you, Pastor Solomon Male. You wanted to interject when your colleagues were submitting, but also in this particular phase, we are trying to look at the best way forward. And there were some suggestions that came on the table, the issues of national dialogue, the issues of truth and reconciliation, to be able to fully put into context what happened in the past, to avoid such history catching up with us again. But let's hear from you.
Now, thank you very much once again. Pastor Male is my name. We've been celebrating, the country has been celebrating the life of Janani Luwum, which wouldn't be bad had the celebrators been towing the line that Janna Luwum towed.
There are two sets of people here. When I talk about the leaders, we are looking at the religious leaders, but we're also looking at the political leaders.
Yeah.
The political leaders representing the side of the government which was in power, and then the religious leaders on the side of the church.
Amin is accused of mismanaging the country, brutality, murders, injustices, extrajudicial killings, corruption, and so on and so forth. Actually, there's not even a single day when President Museveni has ever referred to Amin as the president, former president of Uganda. He has always referred to him as a tyrant whom he couldn't even sit with. Now, referring to past regimes as rotten, brutal, corrupt, and so on and so forth, but then allowing your own reign to follow suit, to follow in the footsteps of what they were doing. But then you herald the people who stood then. But then you yourself don't want even a single statement said against your rule or anything done against your rule when you are walking or going the wrong way. To me, that is hypocrisy.
Well, you're here talking about his regime.
Amin is accused of murdering Luwum. And I raised the question, who would not have murdered him? I believe, in the deepest of my conscience, even Museveni, had he reigned then, he would have murdered him.
On the record, President Yoweri Museveni did state last year, when he was chief guest, he said, had the leaders of then understood the value of dialogue, all the killings that happened in the past, under the past regimes, wouldn't have happened.
What about
that
happening?
Let me say this, and I want every Ugandan to listen to me. General goes into Kasese. Omusinga is invaded, attacked. The men who were brutally murdered, the women, the children, they only had spears and arrows, no guns. Fire! And then I was shocked at the brutality. Who condemned it?
Were you able to understand why that military operation was carried out?
You don't have to convince me about what happened.
Because
killing every life matters.
On this very table, we have had a minister who is in the current government, who happens to be a Mkonzo from that region, who says there are so many things that we do not know that were going on, and they warranted action from the central government.
Now,
almost a similar picture you gave about Idi Amin when you said probably he was right to act the way he did because there were people who wanted to overthrow him.
For information, he said the weapons were found in the Archbishop's home. Pastor Mali was so sure there were weapons. And the army also claims, Mr. General says, there are even UPDF soldiers who died, actually who died.
And there were weapons at the palace.
Now, listen, you condemn Amin for killing Luwum. You don't condemn General Museveni and his team for the people who were killed brutally in Kasese. If you are going to be fair, by all means, both are the same. Even then, more died in Kasese than one Janani Luwum. Many lives were lost. Many orphans were created.
All right.
Many widows were created.
That's on the
now
political
listen
side.
to me. Listen to me. Luwum stood up against, whether by his speech, whether he wrote a note to the president that no, things are going on wrong. Okay? And he stood firm. Whether he was with weapons, I'm not encouraging religious leaders to take up weapons. But I'm saying there are so many opportunities that religious leaders in this country have had to speak out, to raise the concern of the masses, to speak for the weak, the oppressed, the voiceless. There are so many people out there who are bleeding because of the misrule and because of the brutality of that has been rained on them by the sitting government. And what have clerics done? All the time they praise. When the sheikhs were being murdered, one by one, the Anglicans were quiet. The Catholics were quiet. You see, I think for 38 years, clerics have had an opportunity every year in, every year out, at Kololo, in State House, to speak to the power. Yes, we are here praying for the country, but why were no supporters killed in 2021? Did that warrant it? After killing the supporters, then you get the principal, you arrest him, then you drive him in his vehicle and take him to his place. Yet the others are murdered. The others are killed.
Religious leaders,
listen.
some religious leaders have been speaking about
listen to me.
those issues. For instance, the late Dr. Cyprian Kizito Lwanga, he was vocal. He used to talk about these issues.
Being vocal, they've been speaking in riddles. We are praying that there is a lot of murders, blah, 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 blah. But if they were to do what Luwum did, go to the president. Let me give you a scenario which we missed. I wonder whether my brother Imam Kasozi was there. 2009, September, during the eruptive Kayunga riots. Kayunga riots.
Buganda riots, okay.
Okay, Buganda riots. I was part of the interreligious council that sat in Popol. We are deliberating about peace. The Koni team had also come. I remember that's when we saw Olanya, and there's so many others. So they told us about the
incident.
The negotiations that were taking place that failed to bring Koni back. Just as we had started, I think we started on the very day we started. I think on the second day, on the first, then Kayunga breaks out. Bomb canisters, bullets, killings. Do you know how many people were killed then? No one knows. That's when I realized that, even tribalism has resurrected. Nyindo mbavu, nyindo nyimpi, which we didn't have prior, which we had buried. Now, we go further. We asked the convener, who was the then Archbishop, Archbishop Cyprian Kizito Lwanga, to summon two people. The first is the president, the second is the Kabaka of Buganda. The Kabaka of Buganda responded by sending us his Katikiro, who was, I think, Engineer J.B. Walusimbi then, 2009. Now, next was the president. The president sends an excuse that he cannot come, but he already had an appointment with us at Hotel Africana on the last day, that was Saturday. So he said, instead of coming at 2, which was agreed, I'll come at midday, prepare early. So I was part of the team which drafted a document which we had to read before the president. That document brought about, reflected on the history of Uganda, where one, and believe me, Uganda has never had a peaceful presidential change. Every president has been overthrown by force of arms.
True.
2 armies, 1979 UNA, Uganda National Army, and 1986 UNLA, were all chased off the soil of Uganda. Even children who had gone to school, then gone to the military to do service for the country, they were all wiped out. or forced into exile. And some of them, all pilots in India, no matter, and some of them were the starting block for the Ali Salakwena movement and the Joseph Kony resistance. Now, that document documented well the history of Uganda, the brutalities, the fact that we've not had an opportunity to have a peaceful transfer of power. And it was concluding that we now want peace to continue. But one of the resolutions we came up with was that, one, any sitting president, the sitting president should be allowed, should be given opportunity not to be tried for the abuses, because we wanted at least Museveni to leave power peacefully.
Amnesty for the sitting president.
Then two, we also wanted the president to leave power, not to overstay. There are, of course, very many recommendations.
In a nutshell, did he come?
Listen.
You went beyond your limits.
We gave the documents to Dr. Cyprian Chizitolwanga on Friday. Saturday, we go to Hotel Africana. Very early. Dr. Cyprian Chizitolwanga, Museveni was supposed to come at midday. He doesn't come. 2, he doesn't come. 3, he doesn't come. 4, he doesn't come. 5, he doesn't come. 5:30, he comes in. National anthem. Then Dr. Cyprian Chizitolwanga welcomes him. Then 6, the Cardinal Emmanuel Wamala to welcome him officially. After that, he then takes to the floor and reads out the document we had purportedly made. It was the direct opposite of what we had written.
All right.
It praised the president. It praised peace, the harbinger of peace, the best ruler Uganda has ever had, who should continue ruling. I was shocked.
Dr. Cyprian Chizitolwanga.
No, I was part of the team.
I
was there
in the studio.
No problem. I've spoken all this and that.
Let's move
when
on.
Then it also say the document after as he read the document, Dr. Cyprian Chizitolwanga said, "Your Excellency, when we are preparing for this meeting, we budgeted for 360 million. We only raised for ourselves 80 million. You gave us 100 million, so we still have a deficit, which we owe of 180 million.
All right.
We want this event to be annual. We don't have the money." Museveni stands up and says, "Oh, thank you." Listen. Let me conclude it. Wait. Let me conclude it. He said, Museveni said, "Yes, I understand you don't have the money, but I'll underwrite this meeting every year." And from that year, the meeting sits in Munyonyo, Speak Resort.
And most likely you're no longer a delegate.
No, I quit.
Let's hear from you.
No, wait. Secondly, he said, you have a deficit of 180 million. I'm going to give it to you. We clapped. People clapped. I looked at the hypocrisy. No, I couldn't clap. I looked at the hypocrisy. And I said, we missed that point then. Now, what is happening today? Whenever religious leaders go to State House or to Kololo, they overpraise the leader. And all they demand are vehicles, they demand roofs, iron sheets, they introduce him to projects. And Museveni, on many times, has said, he doesn't know how much he owes the religious institutions.
As Imam comes in.
Yes, Honorable. So now, religious leaders have lost the moral authority.
Of religious leaders in guiding and shaping the politics in a non-partisan manner is what should have been debated.
Listen to me.
They have a very big following.
Listen to me.
Actually make
all right. When they start dancing to the piper's roll, to the piper's tune, then they miss the point, and that is why. That is why we have what is happening. We have what used to happen.
Right. Let's hear from Imam.
Happening today.
Let's hear
at even a worse scale.
Let's hear from Imam. Imam, the lessons, and probably you can also weigh in religious leaders. Where is your voice? We can't hear you emulating.
The prophetic voice is
I can't hear you emulating.
Religious leaders, where is your voice? I have stated it here, and I will retaliate it. Our religious leaders largely, they chose to be survivors.
They are compromised by the
reason
state.
Why they became, you the followers, you refused to fund them, and therefore they looked for a funder. And the upper hand will always have a bigger voice than the lower hand. The upper hand is the giving hand. He has said it. We have this deficit, I will repay. And that's part of what you people call classified.
Pentecostals now call Museveni Reverend Museveni.
Let's listen to
He
him.
has become the God.
Let's allow Imam.
And no, Museveni has become a God.
No, that's not acceptable.
No. I'm telling you what is happening.
Let's allow
when they were putting on the new Pentecostal church leadership
at Kololo. I followed that.
Now,
event.
don't you remember that he was addressed as Reverend Museveni?
The only thing I remember that day is that he was reminded of the vehicles that he was supposed to get.
And he was also called Reverend Museveni.
Let's allow him to continue.
The problem is actually not for the religious leaders. The problem is for the followers. You have subjected your leaders to that. There are only very few will stand.
But what kind of life do they want to live? To the extent that we should be the ones to contribute for them?
And the basics.
Because
the unfortunate part is many of you don't know that pastoring is a job. You want to take it as a volunteer, and these people also have families, they have children, they have no other business, and you are not giving them. So many of them have subjected themselves to those who have. Not only President Museveni. Maybe
their lifestyle is forcing them to go beyond.
I don't know
because what I know, the churches, the collections that the churches get every other Sunday can be able to support the religious leader. Let's allow him to conclude.
Now, that's, to me, that's where the problem is. I remember, I think it was either 2016 or 2021. There was we are doing some work at our mosque, and one of the people who claims to be pro the NRM, he came and said, Imam, we bring the president, but we are Yakawumbi to Malevin. I told him no. I told him no, because I know what it implies.
You want to develop?
No, I know, I am not. Go to my place.
What does it imply?
It means that's what he that the one who pays the piper
dictates the tune,
chooses the tune.
But it is
let's
allow him to conclude.
Whether it's taxpayers' money, it should be formal. Do you know the problems you have in the Muslim community? It is because of that 2.5 billion they said they gave in, either to make the constitution and to do the election.
There are also some cars which were brought much later.
They can't forget. That's why I told you. I am where I am Imam. If tomorrow I went to the mosque and I said I deserve a car, and the congregation can afford that car, the moment they fail to give it to me, I will resign.
That's the solution, actually.
I will resign, because it means they are lying to me. I am not their Imam. I always test them. I tell them, you see, we have something here, we are doing. It needs so much. This one is Imam's whatever. Put it there. No, and I don't take it. They see it go and work. So the problem is, there are very few people who can stand up and say, this. So the problem again is we are living the life that is not ours. Okay? Did you see many people clad in Muslim clerical tunics and whatever in the so-called this thing was that they were anointing? They call themselves now Patriotic League. Patriotic League. Who among those is the patriot? If each of them we really investigated them or critiqued them, who would qualify? They are there because I told you that at the time. These are fortune hunters, these are survivors, these are opportunists.
All right.
And that culture invaded the church.
So
Imam,
the lessons for the politicians and the religious leaders.
The lessons is for them to know whom are they working for. Do we work for heads of states or we work for the people? The moment we appreciate that, there will be a change. Otherwise, you are not about to see that change until people adjust their lifestyle, as you have been saying. People live their own lifestyle. People are ready to go and sell, grow your pineapple, come and sell them. Nothing will change. Okay? But because people say, how does an imam sell pineapples? Then when I was growing them for selling, why did you stop me from growing them? When I grow them, I will sell them. Okay? I will participate in that. That is the only way. Otherwise, this business of saying a vehicle. Do all the religious leaders drive vehicles from the president? If he's to bring a vehicle as a gift, let it be a bonus. But the followers should provide for your religious leaders if you want them to remain steadfast. Lastly, religious leaders can belong to political institutions, but when they are doing their pastoral work, they should be impartial. That is the only way. But many of them are partial. Many of them have been silenced, not to talk. Many of them, in our case, the Muslim community today, you know, Odi Kampala broke into two groups. Now we have two groups. One group is waiting for the decision in the court of law. Another group is saying the president knows us. Another group is being really guarded by special force. What do we call them?
SFC.
SFC. You see, they are there guarding. And what are they guarding? I don't want even to pass it in my mouth.
All right. Let me just conclude very quickly. Very quickly. The reason, one of the reasons why you hear all clerics, most clerics quiet, is that they are part of the criminality. And the state just spares them. It gives them patronage. You kill someone, the state gives you protection, SFC. You rob the followers, you extort, then you are given military to guard your church. You are given lead cars. So all you have to do is to sing the song of the leadership. You cannot even rebuke what they are doing. Because one, your only survival is the existence of the leaders.
All right. Let's
who are doing wrong to society or who are disadvantaging the masses.
George, lessons for religious leaders and the political class looking at what happened in 1977.
I'm one of those people who is also equally disappointed. Maybe I will not use as harsh words as Pastor Mali against the religious leaders, because I believe even the Bible, which I read and practice, says that you should be the voice of the voiceless. Some of us in our work we have
that is Proverbs chapter 31 verse 8 and 9. Stand for the weak, the poor, the less privileged, the oppressed, and the voiceless.
Yes. We've had a spate of human rights violations, and NRA, every time it has faced stiff resistance, it has resorted to violations. We saw it in Mukura, we saw it in Kasese, we saw it in northern Uganda, and until recently, when the Central Region rejected it, we saw over 54 people, as per the government report, shot in our neighborhood here, Kampala streets. We've never seen anyone take responsibility for the stray bullets. We've never seen a commander tried. We've never seen those people compensated. We have people missing loved ones. You know, they used to talk about all these people I mentioned, Nanzi, they said men of State Research Bureau. Now we have drones. We have people who are missing loved ones. We have a case in court. We're last seen with men with drones. We have torture cases each and every other day. I was reading a report by SCTV, an organization which says the last 4 years they have received over 30,000 cases. I represent some of those people in court.
Wangadia says they are not there.
Well, out of respect
that is
for this show, I don't want to quote Mr. Wangadia.
Honorable Madam. No, you have to. Me, I quote her. She had the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which would have checked the excesses of government. Yes. But she says, no, we don't. Please, I don't even want to indulge in that. Please don't bring me in your issues.
There's a fresh investigation going to be conducted.
We have arbitrary arrests.
Recently made good comments against.
We have arbitrary arrests and disappearances every other day. People are arrested. Since I told you, last 3 years we've been in the High Court over 50 times on people whose whereabouts are not anywhere to be seen. The last one, there's a gentleman called Muwanga. I said on 26th Liberation Day, Muwanga Martin. The case is coming up before the High Court on Monday, where a police spokesperson, Mr. Onyango, comes out and says, we have him over 10 days. It's now over 15 days. No one knows his detention. No one knows the charge. No one knows where he is for over 15 days, despite the question. So I think that the voice of religious leaders has been quite low or non-existent. But for me, I want to look at it at a bigger level. Religious leaders are captives. We have a patronage state. The NRM is running a patronage state. They have always been dishing out goodies, and they have always tried, because there's no standard way of dishing out goodies to say that every bishop is entitled to this. If you remember right, at some time Catholic bishops or district caddies would not receive the pajeros. Those days were pajeros. Only Anglicans would receive. Then they have graduated. Now you see someone receiving a VX, another receiving a pajero, another. So it depends on how close you are. It's not only to the clerics. You know that even culture institutions have been infiltrated. Culture institutions have some on the payroll, new ones have been created. We know professional bodies. Who doesn't remember the medical doctors kneeling before the president at Kololo in their professional gowns, kneeling? Us as Uganda Law Society, he made a pledge of 5 billion, I think, which has not been fulfilled for 3 years now, towards the house. I think if the ULS makes a lot of noise, the billions will not come. If you keep quiet, maybe they will come. So it has always been.
Can you stop discussing?
Let's allow him to conclude, because we are running out of we are running out of time.
So for me, I think that we are running a patronage state where people who think that if you want to get anything.
They twisted
Order Imam.
No, they twisted the arm of the judiciary to take a decision over UMSC things.
So we are running that. Your closeness to the state, to the president, entitles you to the goodies, and the religious leaders are just captives of that patronage. And I think if we don't address that, religious leaders are just part of the bigger society, and we don't expect them to be so strong in an oasis of damaged institutions. They can't be spared.
All right, Imam, let's hear from Honorable Mukitali.
At all levels, political leaders, religious leaders, cultural leaders, academia, elected, professional bodies like lawyers know what has gone wrong in the country. Unfortunately, they have chosen to do transactional politics. The Archbishop's intention was to speak truth to authority at whatever risk. That I agree. And if somebody has done anything wrong, the rule of law and the Constitution should prevail. However, because of the deception, even people are looking at taxpayers' money, where the bishops, the religious leaders are supposed to be demanding for public goods like education and health, but instead of asking for their own comfort of vehicles. So that's how much we have descended so low. I know, I was told the Archbishop Ruanga, and I think my father-in-law, the Archbishop now, Semogere, is they write some letters, I'm told. There is a letter which they write to the president. We may not be privy to that one, like the one of which the president wrote the judiciary, which went and KK was telling you, what are you discussing when the executive has written to? What we should do, we really know the answer is in the truth and reconciliation. And even give all these criminals some amnesty. We have so many criminals in the government who need amnesty. We need to debate the role of cultural leaders in running of this country. At the time of the Kayunga rebellion, we had the regional tier government
Kayunga riots.
Parliament, Kayunga riots. When I listen to Acholi today, I was saying Article 178, regional government should have said long ago, but we traded off that bill. It was settled because of the Kayunga animosity. And yet clearly, this country should get money at every region as an entitlement, not because you are a supporter of NRM or not. Religious leaders should be entitled. More so, PDM should have been dispensed under the delivery mechanism of religious faith-based organizations and
when they have some of the worst thieves.
Even the UPE and USE should have been dispensed. It can be cleaned there much easier.
Right.
But right now, it is not according to entitlement. It is now by loyalty. If you are loyal, you get.
All right.
But these are things of the national participation includes and entitlement. Citizens should be entitled to get. This is taxpayers' money.
All right, let's go for
It's
break
not
now.
NRM money. It's not president's
When
money.
we return, we'll get the views from the listeners and conclude this discussion. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
It's just a symptom.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, the legacy of Archbishop Janani Luwum and the lessons for leaders of today. My guest, Mr. George Musisi, lawyer and human rights activist, Pastor Solomon Malay, evangelical preacher and executive director at Rising for Christ, Imam Kasozi, lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda, member of the Justice Forum Party, the Honorable Stephen Mutale Birawa, economist, political scientist, who is the immediate former Lisa County MP. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for the views that have come in. So I'll start reading them, and dear panelists, I'll ask you to note them and respond to any that you think will deserve a response. We have a comment coming in from Sharif. It says, well, we have a comment coming in from Yiga Samuel Mary from Namlondo Zone in Boyogerere. He said, thanks for the show. Sincerely speaking, acts of injustice and extraordinary killings are still ongoing. But only that nowadays it's modified and people live in fear to talk about them. The likes of Muslim and Catholic leaders have been victims. These acts will all come out clearly out of the downfall of this regime. Yes, Amin was bad, but let me say that we shall have more Janans celebrated after this regime. Well, that's his comment there. Okelo Patrick Bonyo from Busega says, it's nice to hear from the elders in studio. And I think he's appreciating the historical perspective that Imam Kasozi and Pastor Solomon Malay gave to this discussion. To Sime Fred listening in from Wakiso, thanks for the show. We seem not to have learned much from our past. Like Mr. Birawa says, we should have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What we have today is a replica of what happened then. People being killed. What Amin did can be done by the ones we have today. The difference today, they are sort of good at spinning. Then we have another comment. According to the panelists today, it's as though late Bishop Janna Luwum was a rebel or a proxy of the rebellion. The narrative of standing for human rights is being underscored today. The clergy, he puts a question mark. Maybe only Desmond Tutu shall count. That is Richard in Mutungo. This Pastor Malay is fantastic. Under our constitution, no person should be arbitrarily killed. In Kasese, it was like a blockbuster movie. Killing at will. Today we have Pajero bishops, and he says, this country needs grace. At Mikitale, your national dialogue will not happen under this regime. That's a comment from Stephen. Owori listening in from Tororo. According to history, Amin was right to act the way he acted because any politician wouldn't spare a threat to his power, of which Bishop was, and even now, anybody who is being considered a threat finds his way somewhere. We have another comment, Imam Kasozi. We followers haven't refused to support the clergy. Today's clergy are lazy and lack creativity. Earlier churches and clergy ran church projects, schools, hospitals, farms, etc. to sustain the community. Now it's the lazy preachers who have messed up. Now it's the lazy preachers messed up in the soul, mind, and spirit. That's a comment from Richard. And then he says, today's clergy are even ashaming. Imagine they even accept Japan cars. Previously, clergy drove German machines with stature. I don't know where you want this to go. Well, we have another comment from Joseph Ilado, listening in from Bukolobi. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. I would like to thank the panelists for the discussion. Let me comment on the topic of commemoration of the Archbishop Janani Luwum. There are so many Ugandans who have been killed, tortured, maimed, kidnapped, poisoned, and disappeared even in this regime. For example, Yasin Kauma. We are also seeing Honorable Sejirinya ailing in his deathbed now, under unclear circumstances. All these are done after the demise of Idi Amin. That's Joseph listening in from Bukolobi. We have another comment. The few times the religious leaders have come out, they are told to drop their robes and come and join the political arena. They have drawn them a line they shouldn't cross. Well, gentlemen, those are the comments that are coming in, and I'll begin with you, Imam Kasozi. Some comments coming direct from what you had submitted, your response to some of these issues.
2.5 for the Muslim Spring Card. So.
Let's hear from you, Imam Kasozi. All the questions are coming from me, Imam. Imam, respond to questions that are coming from me.
Yes. I have heard the people, most of them are making comments, but what I have to say is that for sure, many religious leaders have been abandoned by the followers, and therefore
there's a listener who is saying here that they are lazy. You gave an example of you doing a pineapple farm, which brings you extra income.
I'm a poultry farmer.
He's a poultry farmer. And the listener here is saying most religious leaders are lazy and they lack creativity.
And the religious leaders, people you are talking about is not me, it's not Solomon. No. These people occupy big offices and they think in order to manage them, they have to be supported by the state. If the state pays you, you are its worker. You will be subjective to everything, whether you want or not. That is the first thing. But I insist, the followers have abandoned their leaders, and therefore, because their leaders want to live well, they will look for those who will support them, and consequently, they will abandon what we expect from them. Then we shall remain with only a few things, like wedding. You go for wedding. If somebody has died, we come to pray. Even others, even in those prayers, they need to be paid. If you don't pay them, then they may not come. Okay, they will delegate, and then the result will be what Malay is talking about. Everybody to go and begin his or her own church, thinking that that is the only way to survive. And because our people, they are unfortunate, many of them, they don't reason for themselves. Because I tell the people, my role is to preach to you. Understanding is yours. But these days, we want to preach to people and understand for them. And that is a bigger problem. You see, the other thing is standing up to say criticism, even when it is positive. They will even sometimes say, why? The Bagan will tell you, why? You see, because people live out of fear. I think I must say, put it well, we are under captivity. Any person under captivity, any person in the prison.
Probably that is in your mind, Imam Kasozi.
Not in my mind. No. Everybody will see.
Actually, the reason that he's saying it,
let's allow Imam. Let's allow Imam.
He's
not under captivity because he's speaking.
No, I'm telling you, people are under captivity because if you're expecting a vehicle to come, will you? If you are expecting, I want you. You see, sometimes what I say, I recently I was in one of these meetings where we are trying to look at the funding, what is going on. And that's when I learned that much of what you call classified expenditure ends up for these things. And people on the committee of parliament, which looks at finance, have seen who is who. I contested the statement made during that. What somebody made it, I contested.
Your name was there?
No. Why did I contest? I said maybe some people come and pick on behalf of others. Then somebody said no. A senior, a professor of university who has done a lot of research. He said, Imam, learn this. What he is saying is the truth. Several of our religious leaders pick salary, I don't know whether it is salary, whether it is gifts, whether it's whatever, from, and because of that,
loyalty allowance.
And because of that, they have been compromised. When people say they compromise, because people will imagine doesn't. I contested that statement in a very, very senior meeting with people who are informed, members of parliament, senior political party leaders, and whatever, economists. I said, no, what you are saying is not the truth. Probably some people said no. In this case, people receive on their own.
Somebody has sent me a message here saying that what they pick is actually called a retainer. I don't know what that means.
Go ahead.
The point I was making earlier is a point I want to advance. Even when you see the results, our parents and ourselves went to schools which were either Catholic Church founded, Church of Uganda founded, Muslim, SDA. And I would encourage pastors also, they have been less on this. Very few pastors have gone into the area of, because you should be holistic ministry. The issue of fighting poverty, the disease, and ignorance.
President Museveni has been preaching
the money
that.
from the schools takes long to reach you. But if the
President Museveni has been urging religious
and
leaders
I want to agree with him
to embrace wealth creation and help the masses.
Been saying it always from the time I went to Parliament. I didn't expect politicians provide the education system of UPE and USC to perform. And I've been urging my bishops, my sects, say, take charge of your schools. And don't listen even to government on giving you the school fees structure. The schools weren't founded by government. They are founded by the churches, by the Muslims, and no wonder the schools which are founded by these faiths are still doing well. So the money government is giving the few loyal bishops and shakers is taxpayers' money. Is an entitlement. So what for us in National Dialogue we are saying, the entitlement of my religious faith is entitlement, is a right. But people think you have to be loyal NRM, you have to speak to the president.
But they come in form of gifts.
Let's create that situation. The budget of Uganda should have a budget for all dioceses according to how many children do you have in school, how many health centers do you have, how many medical schools do you have, so that even PDM, I strongly believe, as somebody who did some rural economics and community development, that the faith-based poverty eradication programs are more successful than the Ntandiko of LOC during campaign, and people think it's for voting. Actually, if you send a cow, if you see all these projects of World Vision, they are more successful. They are real revolving funds. So all we need is to check the presidentialism. We have given too much power to the president, and we have abused the longevity of NRM. The longevity would have given us good public schools, good health centers, poverty alleviation programs. Instead, it has become transactional. Those who have too much money, in billions, they can't even keep it in banks. And then you find the orphans of Uganda have no examination fees. How do you lack examination fees when the Badamin never asked for examination fees? How do you lack money for the orphans when the Badopote, no orphan paid school fees? So you can really see that we are saying the economy is growing, but things are getting worse. So I think the national dialogue we are talking about is to go back to be a pro-people government.
Somebody has
a
said,
legitimate government.
Somebody has
relevant, so that you say, I collect taxes so that education is given. Now, sometimes when I came from...
President Yoweri Museveni has told you there's already dialogue happening in Parliament. And when you talk about issues of the budget, Parliament handles budget. He says,
I hope you know the dialogue I'm talking about.
Have you not heard about the word? Have you never heard about the French word called parler, which means to talk? He has been on record before the issue of dialogue.
Was he speaking
Parliament is supposed to be a dialogue, but you have just seen the last 4 months of Mpuga. Parliament was a monologue. The other side was not there. But we are not talking about the elected politicians' dialogue. We are saying all citizens have a stake. The cultural leaders have a stake. Religious leaders have a stake. The academia has a stake. The taxpayer has a stake.
But most of them we are talking about are in bondage.
Yes, but you see, you can come out of that bondage. We speak so that others can understand it is possible to say the money you are actually wanting to be bought is actually taxpayers' money.
All right, as we move towards the end of this discussion, let's have some closing remarks, and very quickly we'll come to you, Pastor Solomon Malay.
Now, Amin lived. Janna Luwum lived. Janna Luwum was murdered, allegedly on the orders of Amin. Although the other narrative says that even Amin was shocked to see that Janna Luwum was killed. What did he live for? Social justice. No. I'm looking at Janna Luwum. Janna Luwum. Social justice, equality, peace. He fought extrajudicial killings, and because of that, he not only spoke against those abuses, but he also dared to be part of the machinery that was fighting to remove Amin. And yes, down the road, he's recognized as a hero and even awarded a day of commemoration, even a street named after him. That means all Ugandans recognize him as a hero. Today, if we were to really seriously recognize him, then we would be walking in his footsteps. But when we see evil, we see abuses, we see murders, we see arbitrary arrests, we see arbitrary killings, we see torture, brutalities at even unarmed civilians. And we keep quiet, or we speak in riddles, and we keep praying for those who are raining all these atrocities on the desperate people. Then I think we are totally living the opposite life of Janna Luwum, and we become hypocrites when we celebrate his life.
All right,
it is cowardice to say that clergy are bonded. They are bounded, they are bonded. It is cowardice. The Bible is very clear. Even the cowards will never go to heaven. The Quran is also very clear. The cowards will never go to Jannah. Then how can we be timid and not speak out? Secondly, if we fail to speak out, God will use other people. We'll even use mountains to speak for the masses. But I, for one, Moses Male, in my little capacity, I'll continue doing what God has called me to do, to stand for the weak, the poor, the oppressed, and voiceless. My Imam here says that clergy have no money. So they rely on the parishioners who don't even give them money. I think that is wrong. They've now developed tactics of getting money from the followers. Many of the clergy are stinking wealthy, rotten rich, that you see their stomachs, you see their bums.
Without a school.
You see, all these listen to me. All these projects you talk about, whether for Church of Uganda or Catholic Church, who benefits? It is the leadership in there. Would we be seeing churches fighting wananchi over land? Pastors displacing the poor on their land? It should be the clergy to fight for the voiceless masses who are being disposed of their lands. Now, we are heading for a scenario where wars will be fought because of people who have been chased off their land. And that time is coming. And the leaders are quiet.
All right.
Even those, you see the bishops, they are now standing with the government to fight the people on land, over land.
All right, Patrick in Tinda Rising and says...
Even the Muslims are fighting over property and land.
Patrick in Tinda Rising and says, 2 years ago, the Christians Bishop of Chigezi refused a small car from President Museveni. After a few days, Nakalema delivered a Land Cruiser VX. So what do you want us to do? He says, in fact, some clergy are campaign managers of NRM candidates. We know them. True. We know them. That's another comment. The Pentecostal
movement is more, even the Muslim community, they are sheikhs who are campaigning.
We have another comment from Wilson Vikakanga Muyenga, who says, Kenneth, the government has abandoned the business fraternity in terms of access to financing, and in return, the community of business people have abandoned government in terms of paying taxes. The same is for followers abandoning the clergy because the clergy no longer do their leadership mandate. Then we have another comment, dialogue in Uganda can never be a thing for only political players. It's the politicians who have wounded Uganda. Honorable Mkitale, very quickly as we come to the end of the show.
Fellow countrymen, it is true the situation we are in is ugly. Senior Justice Dolo Winis used the word deplorable. He says sometimes even lacks words to really
express himself.
To express himself on how his home area has deteriorated. But the hope is, religious leaders, if you take your mandate, you can actually restore hope in the citizens. You can actually provide a public good called education and health. You can do poverty alleviation programs within. You have a lot of following a network. The same message goes to cultural institutions. The only thing I'm requesting Honorable Norbert Mao, now working with my NRM government, to deliver yesterday the regional tier government, so that every region in this country try to find homemade solution of economic empowerment, of transformation, because we don't think that this lie deception of saying Uganda is moving when others are moving and others are losing everything is not the way to go. Yes, you have touched the matter of land. In national dialogue, we talk about one of the areas of most is land, and it's possible to fix the land question. And it's unfortunate the so-called liberators who worked with the Archbishop Luwum are the biggest land grabbers in this country.
And the churches are church leaders are collaborators.
Even when we put there the computerized land registry, nobody can give us that record because it will expose who are actually the land grabbers. I don't want another revolution. So we speak for national dialogue, truth and reconciliation, amnesty, Constitutional Review Commission, reducing the powers of the president, reviewing the role of cultural leaders, and face-based. We want a good country, because where we are, things are really bad. I am only saying denial will not help us. Let's admit that things have gone wrong. We can fix them so that we have the right documentation. People who fought elect governments of the day, it was breaking the law. But we have kind of sweetened it, made them heroic. Ugandans fighting Ugandans, you become a general for what? For killing Ugandans? So we should really be apologetic at some point and remorseful and say we can have a Uganda for all of us to
Imam.
Short of that, another revolution is looming, God forbid.
Imam, as we come to the end of the show.
Yes, thank you very much. My easy and quick answer, what ought to be done? It is Ugandans to rediscover themselves. If each of us rediscovered himself, we would go and survive. My brother here, Munyakitari, talks about national dialogue. The unfortunate part, he will sit with people in a hall and they will talk about it. When they get out of the hall and meet Imam Kasozi, the next day they will be changed people completely. Why? Because he is just talking to them. He has very sweet words, but the sweet words, they will tell him they are not eaten. Tetulia bigambo birungi.
Imam Kasozi abawa. Imam Kasozi
so
does not pay school
therefore,
fees.
to that effect, that is the problem. This business of school fees is talking about. You say, I cannot, you really, I still say, in a confused government, as they say, I studied from senior 1 to senior 4, paying the same school fees throughout. From senior 1, 1976 to 1979, we were paying 650,000,
50 shillings.
650, not thousand. Lukaga atano, 650 shillings. First term, 250. Second term, 250. Third term, 150. With what? With a full uniform, with books, with everything at the
Government
school.
books not for sale.
Yes,
Books
free.
there by government.
Oh,
Scholastic
free.
materials by government.
I wonder, today with all these brains, because I mean is one, the one that...
And the growing economy.
They cannot even, we cannot sustain. You can't believe that a Uganda government gives a pupil in a school for a year only 20,000 shillings. A year? 20,000.
7,000 per term.
Now, where are we leading?
And the president moves with bags of money to throw away.
And when somebody stands up in the so-called parliament you are talking about to raise, we need to challenge. Why do some people get this? I know, for example, people who get scholarships to go outside to study oil, to study what. You will get surprised. You will find a boy, his name is Otto, but he cannot speak even if you greeted him that Kopango, he cannot answer.
All right, let's hear from Mr. George Musisi.
Just very quickly, yes, I think we agree that there are many Ugandans who think that this thing called government doesn't work for them. This structure called government, there are many people who feel disaggregated from government policies. So I entirely agree with Honorable Mkitali that we need a national dialogue. Honorable Mao, when he was joining government about 3 years ago, this was one of the top things on his, because when we sat down as a country 29 years ago and agreed with this consensus called the Constitution, many things have changed. Some things have worked, some haven't worked, and yes, I also agree that there's a lot of powers concentrated in the presidency. This piecemeal amendments of the Constitution we've seen don't work. We need to talk to each other in an open and sober way, and we come up with a new consensus. And I think that will be one of the ways. Otherwise, this polarization doesn't portend very well for the future of this country.
So in a nutshell, you think we need to go for holistic reforms?
We need to go for holistic reforms while speaking to each other. So, but what are the problems? What are the problems? People think, even if there are perceptions, people think there is corruption. People think there is nepotism. People think there is...
It's not thinking. That is what is happening. There is nepotism, there is corruption, there is thieving, there is arbitrary arrests and killings.
Rationalization failing when we have just been creating them the last 40
even
years.
People in the studio, even people in the studio here know that there are those things.
So people are not thinking. That is the fact, and that is the truth.
Where the real money is being lost.
If we didn't know, it will not decide for this country.
Only for investors.
And the clergy are praying for the thieves. The clergy are praying for the thieves. They are praying for the murderers. They are praying for the robbers. They are praying for the abusers.
To talk to each other.
The clergy. I want to really rebuke the clergy because that is my constituency.
All right,
no. The clergy must move and resume and repossess the prophetic voice.
Part of the population.
I'm afraid I have to bring this discussion to an end. Let me thank you and the listeners for actually being part of this show.
There is always
thank you very much for the views that you have shared, and thank you very much, dear panelists, for coming to studio to share with the listeners. Well, I've been your host, Kenneth Lukwagandason, bringing this show to an end, and I wish you a fruitful weekend.